Sergeant Kevin Johnston, who is an incredible officer over at West Valley. I got to know him when he was on patrol, and then as a detective, and got to work alongside him, and just got to see just the amazing work and just the kindness that he would always provide to victims of crime whenever we responded out. And then we also have Natalie Martinez Pretty. She's one of the victims advocate at West Valley City, and I also got to work alongside her and got to know her. And she's also one of the certified Timpanogos Legal Clinic advocates as well too. So if you need any assistance with those civil protective orders, Natalie is a great point of contact, centralized in West Valley. And I'm just feel so excited that you all get to hear from them too. They're really incredible individuals. And just one of just good friends as well too, but also just the way that they are kind and courteous to those victims of crime, especially for our domestic violence and sexual assault victims, where there's this collaboration that's taken place and just really just part of an integral part now at West Valley. So we're excited to hear from them and what their process is, and just being able to share their voice and their story as well too. So I'll turn it over to Natalie and Sergeant Kevin Johnston.
Thank you, Beatrice. Thanks for inviting us to this. I'm Sergeant Johnston. I've been with the West Valley City Police Department for about 10 years. Prior to this, I was with another local agency in the Salt Lake Valley. And over the course of my career, I've gravitated towards violent crimes, especially domestic violence. And I think the reason I did it is for a multitude of reasons. But what I didn't realize at the time was that it's personal history that drove me towards it. Coming from what I can say now is a broken home as a kid, where my parents would fight all the time. I watched both my parents get hauled off in handcuffs as a kid. So now I grow up and I want to change the system. I want to get these people out before the kids grow up seeing their parents get hauled away, seeing their parents hurt each other. So if we can find a way to intervene, either through the lab, through police investigations, through victim advocates, we can find a way to get early intervention, we can hopefully break the system. So with that, I've taken a special interest in domestic violence cases, and I've been assigned, when I got promoted, as the patrol domestic liaison. So anything that happens domestic violence wise with our patrol division ends up going to me. And anything that needs to go between the patrol division and our investigations division, I become the voice for. Any changes, any updates, any trainings, any way that we can make our patrol officers better, that's my responsibility. So with that, I've got some training to hopefully help you guys out with. Can everyone see this? The PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right. So, as stated, I am Sergeant Johnston, and with me I have Natalie Martinez Pretty. She's an amazing victim advocate I've worked with for a very long time, and we really have some amazing people over at West Valley. They're assigned to our attorney's office, but they work hand in hand with the police division. They're actually over in our building, so if we have questions or needs, we just walk over to their desk. And they need something, they walk over to us, and it's a great relationship we've got going on.
We can't hear the sound.
Can't hear the sound?
Yeah. You might need to unshare and share again with the optimized video and sound.
Hey, share, say again.
So you might want to like unshare and then share again. Like when you go to share, there's a little boxes to check optimize for sound and video. It's kind of on the right as you go to share.
Ah, you're right. First time I've ever shared a PowerPoint on these.
No, you're good. Yeah, it's one of those weird things. Thank you, Miriam.
Kira, are you okay? Yeah, he says that it's my fault that I can't see signs. Yeah, okay, what I'm gonna need you to do right now, Kira, is get into a public place, okay?
Who the hell are you talking to?
Nobody. I'm sorry. Kira? Patrol have a possible 273-5 at 9213 Longview Avenue. Send additional units. LAPD, I'm coming in! Get off her, hands where I can see them. Back up.
Make me.
You really want to add assaulting a police officer to your charge?
In for a penny.
Put your hand behind your back. Kira, put the gun down.
He's not a bad guy. He just gets mad sometimes.
He was about to kill you.
No, I overreacted. I shouldn't have called.
No, you made the right decision. You are in danger here.
They took his kids.
He is the reason he lost them.
No, his wife.
No. I know what he said to you, Kira, and that's a lie.
You don't understand.
Okay. None of that matters. What matters right now is the choice that you are making, okay? If you shoot me, you're not gonna save him, but you will go away to prison forever, okay? Just put the gun down. Kara, you have the power right now to save me, okay? Just put the gun down. It's okay. Turn around.
So, bit of an eye-opener for that one. Even though it's a fictional TV show, I think it shows the dynamics with a lot of domestic relationships that we as law enforcement or those of us in the justice system respond to. The perpetrators hold this control over the victims time and time again, leading the victims to either stay with them for periods of time when any rational person would tell them that they get out of there, or the victims end up becoming so involved they protect the suspect in any way, shape, or form. And I'm sure everybody here can attest that we've dealt with victims who justify the violence against them for various reasons. And so we're trying to find ways to get around that to help these victims get out of these situations, right?
Where the hell did you?
So Utah's a bit unique when it comes to domestic violence laws, as we're all aware. When we respond to a domestic violence call, we're bound to investigate. And anytime there is evidence of certain crimes, we have to make an arrest. But in addition to that, we are legally obligated and morally obligated to provide all we can for these victims. And that includes, we have to safety plan for the victim, whether it be through our local victim advocates, whether it be through external resources. West Valley goes through SVS, and they've been amazing to work with. We've been going with them for years now, and we've got a great relationship. So we're trying to find ways to help these victims. And if that means that we get them to shelter, we get them to some sort of outside facility, we get them somewhere where the suspect can't get to them, we get them medical care, we get them emergency cell phones, we get them transportation, whatever it may need to help these victims through the process. Even if they don't prosecute, we still want to help them through the process to get them out of these situations. So I think Utah's doing it right when it comes to our requirements for domestic violence laws. That way the victims can't refuse to cooperate, and we're still getting those suspects out of there. And I believe that if we weren't bound to make an arrest, more likely than not, many of these victims wouldn't press charges and we wouldn't be able to help them. So one of those things that help us is the LAP form, the lethality assessment. The new law that was passed last year now requires all law enforcement agencies to conduct a lethality assessment on any allegation of a domestic violence crime involving intimate partners. So the LAP, I'm sure everyone knows the history, but the LAP was created in 2005 through the Maryland Domestic Violence Network. They started realizing patterns of domestic violence behavior where victims and suspects had certain linking factors. And as they started studying all the various police reports, they came up with the 11 questions. The top 3 high risk, and then the other 8 that when you combine them together make a high risk. So as they started putting this together, it went nationwide, came out to Utah, and Woods Cross was the first agency to adopt it in 2011. And then West Valley came from there, and then it just exploded. And now every law enforcement agency has to do it. West Valley's a little different though. We do a lethality assessment, whether it be intimate partners or cohabitants. We do them on every domestic violence call with any allegation. So we have an internal system for just cohabitants, family members, roommates, such as that. And we still do the just statewide one for the intimate partners. West Valley goes on more than 250 domestic violence calls a month. And that's including non-criminal and criminal calls. I know many agencies don't document the non-criminal verbal domestics. They may close them out one way or another, but we write up a full report on all the non-criminal, what we call verbal domestics, because we believe it creates that pattern. That pattern of behavior coming from the victims in these non-criminal domestics can provide us a basis of information about how that relationship works. The controlling behavior, the historical factors, prior incidents that we might not have enough PC to go on, but the victims still give us those statements feeling more safe that the suspect isn't getting arrested that time. So they're going to be more open with us. By documenting those, we can use those as a historical basis when we finally do arrest the suspect, book them. We can show that we've responded to the house X number of times, and this is the pattern of escalating behavior. For those from the UDVC, I stole some stats from y'all. Y'all have some great information on your website, and I think y'all got them from the state of Utah. But just over here on the right, some of the various stats that domestic violence is one of the leading causes of homicide across the nation, and especially in Utah. The murder or murder-suicide incidents that occur are unacceptable. And these are ones where if we look into the history, I'm sure that there were indicators there in the past. For those of us who've been in law enforcement for a while, I will guarantee you either have or will be on one of these calls involving a family, and it sticks with you forever. Some of the other things on here, 23% of the homicide suspects in these cases threaten the use of weapons prior to the homicide. And that's one of the questions on the lethality assessment. The escalation of violence occurred in 20% of the cases. I'm sure that number would be higher if we actually had all the police reports and everything going with those. So I'm sure if we documented every single domestic violence, we'd have a much higher number of escalating violence. And then 39% of perpetrators had a criminal history, a DV criminal history. For those who've worked these cases, I'm sure that you can attest that most domestic violence suspects that get arrested, it's not their first time. They've either been arrested with a prior victim, they've either been arrested with the same victim, or they've been arrested for some sort of violent crime outside the domestic household. People don't just wake up one day and all of a sudden say, I'm going to be a domestic violence perpetrator. I'm going to start abusing my significant other. This is an escalation. They start small with the control and then they move up to the escalating violence further and further, unfortunately leading towards homicide, which we're hoping to intervene in these cases, right? So the LAP system, there's a zillion things that it helps us with. And some of the newer patrol officers may grumble, why do we do this? Why do we ask all these questions on every call? And this is what I tell them. It helps our victim advocates, it helps the victims, it helps the prosecutors, it helps keep the bad guys locked up. When I talked with Natalie and I talked with our prosecutors about this to find out their opinions, because I have my own, the information I got from our prosecutors is that it helps them get no bail or higher bail warrants. It helps them get protective orders on behalf of the victim, even if the victim doesn't want to go sign up for it themselves, they can get a pretrial protective order. It helps the prosecutors determine what kind of treatment, probation, incarceration they need to seek for that suspect or defendant. Or it helps our prosecutors figure out if there needs to be more investigation based on allegations of other DV crimes that may have occurred. I'm sure that those who've seen these laps have looked at them, or they've seen the police reports where a victim reports something that happened today, but they also say on Monday, he did this or that, broke property, hit me, strangled me, struck the kids, whatever it may be. It's like a waterfall when the victims finally decide to come forward, and all of a sudden zillions of incidents come out that we might need to be looking at a dozen incidents that have occurred over the recent history as opposed to just today. And as Brianna Mann, one of our prosecutors, said, it's the most helpful tool they have to get the bigger picture of what's going on and how they can keep the victims safe and the defendants treated or taken care of in the long run. Natalie, who so graciously provided me some information on her, and it helps her as a victim advocate understand how to prioritize the victims. Who are the high risk ones? Who are the ones who need the resources the most? And it helps them also figure out, do these victims need some sort of special assistance, whether they be second language, English, their primary language is possibly Spanish, or because we have a very big Hispanic population in West Valley. So we have a lot of DV victims who they don't even speak any English. So we rely on our victim advocates, Spanish-speaking officers, language lines, whatnot, to communicate with these victims. So the LAP form and our supplement forms help them determine if we need translators or we need some way to get a language service for those victims. As we move forward, West Valley, we've got different ways we train our officers. So the lethality assessment, domestic violence investigations are taken very seriously. We do quite a bit of training on this. Any new hire officer goes through a 2-week in-house academy where we provide them training on various subjects, including about 4 to 6 hours on various domestic violence investigations. Now, this is just the in-house. This doesn't include their field training, which lasts approximately 6 months. This is just an in-house where we teach them the very basics of domestic violence investigations, legal requirements for domestic violence laws, and the lethality assessment protocol. During the lab, you're getting a lot of the same information that our new officers are being provided. We explain to them what the lethality assessment is, where it started, the significance of it, why we do it. They're provided videos from officers conducting lethality assessments with real victims from prior cases. And that way, these officers can see when they go out on their first call how they're going to do it. It can be a little intimidating for them because it's kind of weird walking up to somebody you've never met before and asking very intrusive questions. So through the in-house academy and the field training process, we're trying to get these officers comfortable with asking the uncomfortable questions because, again, we want to help these victims and we're not going to help them unless we ask them this stuff, get this information, and move on. Additionally, we have annual department trainings, regular digital bulletins that are sent out throughout the department. Any major updates, such as when the state law changed to require the LAP program throughout the state, when that changed, we had to do some quick training for all our officers. And the way that usually works is we create digital training that's emailed out. Officers, like everyone here, through a government agency, you have to sign in, you have to watch it, you have to sign that you've done it. In addition to that, the training is sent out to supervisors directly, and they'll have team meetings with each of their assigned teams to provide that training to make sure the officers understand. Regardless whether it's an officer in a plainclothes narcotics unit, whether it be a patrol shift, whether it be detective, every officer gets this training. So even if they're not going to use it probably within the next year or 2 years or 3 years, eventually all those officers are going to rotate around. They're going to need this information. So we make sure that they all get trained. Additionally, we have shift briefings before every single shift in patrol. And usually 15 minutes from that is designated for training. So if there's any issues within domestic violence investigations, patterns where officers are doing something they shouldn't be doing, or officers are failing to conduct a lethality assessment with cohabitants, or they're failing to contact appropriate resources, we can address those in the shift briefings rather than waiting 6 months for department training. Finally, we get legal updates from our prosecutor's office, any new laws that just came down, including the new laws recently about domestic violence crimes. I know that they added some new crimes to the cohabitant statute, including propelling a substance. So that's a good one. That one came about because our state rep came on a ride along with West Valley. He went on a call where one party in a DV relationship ended up spitting on the other party. But because it wasn't a cohabitant crime, we didn't end up making an arrest because the victim didn't want to press charges. So next thing we know, we have a new law getting passed. So state reps want to come for a ride along with you guys. It's a great opportunity to get these laws changed if you need to. West Valley, when it comes to conducting a lethality assessment, what we do is, as I stated earlier, the state law indicates that anytime there's an allegation of a domestic violence crime, an officer shall complete the lethality assessment with intimate partners. And that is through the CJIS portal for the 11 questions. But West Valley, and I'll show you a couple copies, West Valley also does it on cohabitants. So anytime there's an allegation involving roommates, adult parent, adult child, siblings, anything like that, we still conduct the 11 questions as well. Normally what happens when we go on a call, we conduct an investigation. Our patrol officer is going to go out. If they determine that there's probable cause, the suspect gets arrested. In this case, in a scenario incident with this, officers responded to a call for service. The victim meets him outside. She's got a raspy voice. She's apologizing. She's got marks on her neck. They eventually end up talking to the kids. The kids admit that they witnessed some domestic violence crimes, property damage, and strangulation. So eventually the suspect's arrested. What would happen in the scenario situation is that the primary officer is going to take that defendant into custody, transport him to jail, book him on those charges, while the backing officer stays behind to help out the victim. The backing officer is going to stay behind, conduct the lethality assessment. They're going to contact SBS. They're going to contact our victim advocates. In this case, it's an intimate partner, so SBS would get contacted. Our patrol officer, the backing officer, would give the question answers to SBS, tell them, hey, this is what we got. This is the all the yes questions. They're high risk. The victim would or would not like to speak with you. In that situation, if the victim says, no, I don't want to talk to anyone, we have trained our officers, and it's taken quite a while to get them to make this a habit, but we try to teach our officers to put that phone on speakerphone, walk up to the victim and say, hey, I've got SBS, South Valley Services here on the phone. They're an advocate for you. They'd like to help you. Will you talk to them? If the victim is still no, SVS can talk over the speakerphone and say, hey, you know, this is who I am. Can we at least give you a call later on? SVS needs that verbal consent of, yes, you can call me later on, because SVS doesn't want to be calling a home number and have the suspect pick up and have the victim possibly get in a bad situation again. So we've been teaching our officers to do that, put them on speaker and give that verbal consent. So if the victims do say yes, I'll talk to them, our officers will give the cell phone to the victim, let the victim start talking, and the officer will step out of the room. That way, all the safety planning, conversation between the victim and SVS is not recorded on body cam. So if she ends up going, if our victim ends up going with staying with Aunt Sally or something, the victim doesn't get that on body cam. So when discovery is later on made, her location and safety planning is not divulged to the suspect. That is our hope. So what happens after this is the backing officer will call, text, or somehow message the primary officer at the jail and say, hey, victim scored high risk in this. They're talking with SBS. This is some more history. That way the primary officer can include that with a probable cause statement for the judge. And the judges, I don't know if we have anyone from the judicial system in here, but the judges really need to see everything, all the history, the lab assessment, all the details, outstanding warrants. The judges need to see that because they can't look up the police report or the criminal history during the booking process. So that's one of the things that has been brought up in briefing before, where we've been trying to get officers to do more thorough booking statements that keep these defendants locked up. So this is the dual purpose for our two different forms for West Valley. On the left-hand side, we've got the non-intimate cohabitant investigations. On the right side, we have the intimate partners. So on the left side, usually the non-intimate ones, we've got, you know, the family relationships. They're just cohabitants per state law. And we're going to complete the internal West Valley platform. We have a system called OnBase, where officers can plug in digitally, fill out the yes or no questions, and it submits it through our internal database. In that case, where it's just cohabitants, we'll contact our internal victim advocates through West Valley, notify them of what's going on. They've got an after hours number, they've got a direct email for their whole group. Whatever way we need to contact them, we can give them a heads up of, hey, we just went out on this case. Even if our officers don't contact them right away because it's perhaps low risk, our victim advocates still get a copy of that through the prosecutor's office because of the way it's routed. Examples of this: brothers, roommates, parents, cousins, anyone that's not romantically involved, but they still have some sort of cohabitant relationship according to state law. On the other side, we've got the intimate partners. We've got anyone who's been in a romantic relationship. They don't necessarily need to be intimate, even though they're called intimate partners. If they've been intimate at any time, even if they were formerly intimate 20 years ago, they're still fall under the state code. So ex-spouses, they've got kids together. They've been divorced for 14 years, sharing custody. Domestic violence crime occurs, they're still falling under that state statute. So officers are still bound to take action and conduct those investigations. So this is the West Valley internal cohabitant lap form. This is through our on-base program. As you can see, we've got our 11 questions down here. It's going to autofill some of these based on how you answer these questions. And we got our case number up here. What it'll do down here is, if, again, any cohabitants, we have to provide them with certain resources. We have to provide them information about what kind of programs are out there, what is available, and Natalie could further explain that. But like many law enforcement agencies, we have a victim pamphlet that we give out. It's a little trifold thing, and a little box down here. Officers click yes or no. That way, when the victim advocates get this, when the detectives get this, they can look at that box real quickly to know, hey, were the victims notified of all their rights per state law? If not, they're going to reach out to them and make sure that they get those resources. I know recently when my officers took a telephonic allegation, the victim refused to meet with officers in person, no matter how much we tried. We ended up contacting her a couple days later after things had calmed down, but we couldn't get her that pamphlet at the time, so my officer went over it verbally with her. So these are some things the officer would probably still say yes, no there. That way, when advocates get it, they know what they need to follow up with. Valley also has what we call a supplemental lethality form. We love forms at West Valley. We love paperwork. Sometimes our officers complain that it's a little too much, but there's a purpose behind them all. And once they get comfortable with them, they fly through them fairly quickly. This supplemental form collects a lot of additional information that's important for our advocates and for our prosecutors. This will have things such as the relationship between the parties. Was there alcohol or drugs involved? What's the victim's primary language? That way, our advocates know if they need to get a translator. We've run into some very obscure languages here in West Valley where even the phone translation services can't provide a translator. So they might need to reach out to a rare third-party resource to find that translator. We need to know if IPV or SANE came out for a strangulation investigation or a code R. We need to know, was there prior history? Is it documented? One of the biggest things that we collect on these is down here. It says relative name, relative phone number, email, and victim alternate phone. The reason we do this is because a lot of times the suspect will turn off the victim's phone, or the victim's phone gets damaged during the incident. And how are our victim advocates supposed to get a hold of the victim if there's not a working phone? So the other reason is sometimes the victims and children will go and stay with another family member because they want to find somewhere safe. So we collect this number and name and email so that if the victim's contact info no longer works, we have an alternate person to contact and say, hey, this is Detective so-and-so with West Valley. This is victim advocate Natalie with West Valley. I'm looking for Jane Doe. Hopefully that relative or relative's phone can either tell us where they are, provide us additional contact info, or say, hey, they're staying with me. Let me give the phone to them. So those are some of the biggest things I think we can collect from victims for this additional supplemental form that we collect. So as I've stated, West Valley has our different forms, and this is how we break it down, who does what. Over here on the right, we have the state mandated UCGIS form. We have that supplemental form, which I just showed y'all with all those additional questions outside the lab. And then down here, we have the cohabitant lethality form through our internal database. For newer officers, we give them this cheat sheet because it can be confusing which form to fill out during which investigation. So we just give that to them, both hard copy and digital, so that they can flip it out and say, oh, I've got a DV involving husband and wife and they got kids. This is the area I'm going to go. Or I've got one involving elderly parent and adult son, which happens more than we'd like to see. We're seeing more and more frequently a lot of drug addicted adult children abusing their elderly parents. And so this is going to fall under DV laws as well. And so our officers know which forms they're going to have to fill out, but we get them the proper resources on the back end. One of the things I wanted to go over is our patrol response to strangulations and IPVs. Strangulation cases and intimate partner violence investigations can be a bit complicated, especially for newer officers. We know that strangulation became a felony a couple years ago, and getting the information we need to successfully prosecute these can be intimidating for newer officers or even experienced patrol officers, because there's so much information to gather, so many subtle things, so many subtle pieces of evidence to look for to make sure that it goes into a report and it can hold these defendants accountable. So our strangulation form, and I'll show that to you guys in the next slide, but it has a lot of questions on it with various evidentiary indicators that our officers can ask the victims to indicate there was evidence of strangulation. Now, if we have a cohabitant or intimate partner with allegations of strangulation, and whether we arrest the party or not, we're going to be heading down the road towards an IPV, the intimate partner violence investigation. And that's going to be through forensic nurses, through Wasatch forensic nurses. They've always been amazing to come out and help us. So I believe that through them and these forms, we're actually able to increase prosecution for strangulations. This is the form we use. I know a lot of agencies probably use some sort of strangulation form, but this is what West Valley uses. When our officers go out, they're going to go through these questions like a little check mark. Things they observe, they're going to ask the victim direct questions such as, hey, did they use their knee? Did they use their right hand? Did they use their left hand? On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you feel the pressure was? Sometimes it's things that the victim can't tell us, such as the marks around their neck, the fingerprints around the sides of their neck, or the scratch marks, or the redness in their eyes, the petechiae on their cheeks, the raspy voice. These are things that the victim doesn't realize are all indicators of strangulation. And the scenario we were given today,
The Sears building is no longer there.
say again?
I think someone was just accidentally unmuted. You can go ahead.
Okay. So in the scenario we're given today, the victim definitely has some indicators of strangulation. She's got a raspy voice. She keeps apologizing for it. She's got marks on her neck. The young child indicates, you know, dad grabbed mom around the neck and held her. So we've already got multiple sources, multiple evidence of strangulation on this. So we're going to go through this form with the victim in the scenario here. And the primary officer or backing officer can go through it with her, depending, but we're generally going to go through this form alone with the victim. We always interview our victims, or harp on our officers to interview the victims without the suspect nearby or within earshot. because as we all know, victims clam up if they think that the suspect can hear or see them talking to police. So once we go through this form and we've got the indicators of strangulation, we move on to the IPV. And through Wasatch forensic nurses, the IPV is increasing our ability to prosecute strangulation. And strangulation is probably one of the biggest indicators, I believe, of DV homicide. If people are willing to try and strangle someone to cause them to pass out or attempt to kill them, then it is but a small step to homicide or murder-suicide. So the IPV exam, like I said, without the hard evidence, it's hard to prosecute these defendants for the strangulation and felony ag assault charges. The IPV lets law enforcement and forensic nurses work together to collect that evidence to build the strong cases. Wasatch forensic nurses, if the victims agree to an IPV exam, we're going to provide them transportation to the hospital, hook them up with the forensic nurse. We're going to give them transportation home if we can, and we're going to collect the evidence. Wasatch forensic nurses will take care of everything on the back end through their reports, testifying in court, and this creates better collaboration for expert witnesses when we get up on the stand to hold these defendants accountable. So the process, and it has to be an intimate or cohabitant partner in a relationship some way that falls under the cohabitant state code, and there has to be an allegation or indication of strangulation, and that includes smothering, external neck pressure, something where the suspect is cutting off the air and blood flow to the victim's brain. If they qualify for this, an officer is going to complete their basic investigation on scene, go through the strangulation form. We're going to inform the victim of the seriousness of strangulation. A lot of victims, when you explain the danger of strangulation to them, it's surprising to them. They didn't understand that what just happened to them can cause irreparable damage to their brain. And the victims don't realize that even a couple seconds getting strangled can cause long-term effects. So we explain the dangers and the lap dangers that occur with strangulation. And we encourage the victims to get the IPV exam for their strangulation over at a hospital. If the victims agree, officers are going to notify the supervisor on patrol. Doesn't matter if it's their supervisor or a supervisor, but they'll notify a supervisor and say, hey, I've got a victim here. I need to transport him to the hospital. And supervisor's going to say, great, have you called Wasatch yet? And the officers are going to make sure that Wasatch forensic nurses get notified so that they can get one of their forensic nurses on the way. They need to know basics such as, what's the allegation? What's the, where are you headed? Where's the victim going to be? Which hospital do we need you to meet at? And then the officers will provide transportation to the hospital for the victims. Because if somebody's just been strangled and the blood flow cut off to the brain, we generally don't want them getting behind the wheel of a multi-ton vehicle if they pass out. So we'll get them to the hospital. We'll stay there until the forensic nurses show up. We'll notify SVS or our internal advocates over at West Valley of what's going on. If they're just cohabitants, a lot of times our victim advocates come out to the hospital to help the victims through the process along with the forensic nurses. So they've got the two-layer of protection there between the advocates and the forensic nurses to help them through the process. If the victim declines, officers are supposed to at least give Wasatch forensic nurses a heads up of, hey, this is what we had. The victims don't want it right now. Maybe they'll change their mind tomorrow. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes they're too busy. They're afraid of the system. So our victim advocates or whatnot can follow up with them the next day and convince them to come in. Some information about our various victim advocate resources. Again, West Valley, I believe that we have a great relationship between SVS. Abe's out here, and I actually just got an email from Abe last week offering to come out and train our officers. But we've got a great relationship with our advocates in the attorney's office in SVS. We stay in contact all the time. Any concerns that get brought up are discussed back and forth in an informal way so that we can find ways to improve upon things, whether it be through training for officers or whether it be better contact for various resources at SVS after hours or our advocates after hours. So SVS, they're primarily focused on intimate partners. Once in a while, they can help with cohabitants, but their primary focus, because of the way their grants work, is for intimate partners. If our officers go out, conduct a lethality assessment, determine that the victim is high risk, our officers are required to call SVS per state law and per department policy. They're required to call SVS and provide a TV pamphlet to the victim. And that phone call to SVS, more likely than not, we're going to call in and it's going to get picked up by whatever intake employee advocate they have working at the time. Sometimes there's a hiccup. Sometimes we call in and the phone doesn't get answered, or sometimes their phone system's down. Sometimes they're on the line with another law enforcement agency. So I always tell my officers, look, wait about 10, 15 minutes, call back. They might be busy on the other line. If there's still issues, we have phone numbers for their management staff, for their directors and everything. We can call after hours and say, hey, we're trying to call in on this high risk victim and we can't get a hold of anyone. And then they can handle things on the back end. As I stated before, we're trying to get the victims to talk to SVS, a phone, to get those resources, whether it be shelter, long-term care, counseling, whatever it may be. We're trying to get those victims talking with an advocate to open up that avenue. And again, as I stated earlier, SVS does need that direct consent from the victim to provide any services or call them back later on. So we'll put them on speakerphone to have them at least give that consent over the phone. And if that's a hiccup, some of our officers forgetting to do that, we can directly address it with those officers to ensure it doesn't happen in the future. On the other side, we've got our victim advocates like Natalie over here, and they are not bound to any specific victim. They are not bound to just intimate partners or just cohabitants. They can help either side. They can help intimate partners, cohabitants, and it doesn't require them to be high risk, because a lot of times there's indicators where either the victim refuses to talk to us about the 11 questions. They just don't want to answer the questions. But officer's spidey sense says, hey, something's going on here. This is something where we need to help this victim early on before things escalate. So our advocates can reach out and start getting that ball rolling with them at any time. To do this, our advocates, as I stated earlier, have multiple ways to contact them. They've got direct numbers during regular office hours, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5. There are always multiple advocates in the office. A lot of them stay late at night for all those late night calls. I see them coming in on like Fridays and Saturdays. But they've also got their after hours number, where there's always an advocate on call. So our officers can call the on-call advocate and say, hey, this is what we have. We need your help. Can you come out and help? This victim doesn't have transportation. They've got small children. They need car seats. They're homeless, or they just got locked out of the house by the perpetrator and they've got nowhere to stay. Them and their 3 small children, whatever it may be. So our advocates can come out. They've got various resources, financial assistance, to hopefully help these victims in the emergency situation. And the last way we can communicate is they actually created a specific email group that they all have access to, the victim services at wbc-ut.gov. So an officer can send an email to that and say, hey, I have a victim under this case number. this is the circumstance. They need some assistance later on. They don't need it right now, but I think they might need definitely someone to reach out. So if an officer sends an email to that victim services email, it will get blasted to every victim advocate. So whoever comes first in the morning can probably see that and figure out their best course of action. Ali, I'm going to let you take it from here since this is more your purview.
Thanks, KJ. So I'm Natalie. I've been with West Valley for 3.5 years now. We work directly with, our officers as well as the prosecuting office. So we're kind of unique in that way that we see both aspects of how everything will work. I just wanted to share, I know that we mentioned DV pamphlets a lot, or KJ mentioned that quite a bit throughout his presentation. So I just wanted to share an example of what ours looks like. All of our pamphlets include just information on DV relationships, cycle of abuse, just education for the victim. So even if for any reason they do not want to speak with us, they still have that pamphlet when the officers are able to give it to them. And I have had people that, even if they didn't want to talk to us, when officers went out and spoke with them, they're like, they left this here with me. They told me that you guys could help, and they reach out themselves. And that's always awesome to hear. We do provide them in English and Spanish. And that's one of the biggest things that we provide. It also just has kind of a general resource list. We have shelter information, counseling services, and some legal assistance info as well. And that is something that we also go over if we are called out on scene. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of provide what that looked like. To be able to go to the next one. Thank you. So this is what our crisis response looks like when we are the ones that are called out to go on scene. Our biggest thing, aside from obviously going over resources, is providing support. Especially if we are going out on scene, there are those victims that emotionally just maybe don't want to speak to officers, or they've had, negative feelings towards officers, or they're just intimidated and they're scared. So we're really there to want to help them and provide that emotional support to be able to get them to a point where we can have that conversation and let them know, we're just here to help. One of the biggest things that I like to tell victims when I go out on scene, like, I'm here to help you out in any way that I can. We're here with the officers, but our main focus is to ensure that you're taken care of. Another thing, like he mentioned, we do get called out for IPV and the SANE exams or the CODAR kits. With those, we usually like to go if the victim requests us to go. Sometimes they do have their own support, and there are a lot of people that are involved with IPV exams, not including hospital staff. So if the victim is going to be overwhelmed, we don't want to be an additional person that's just trying to bombard them with information. So we always like to make sure, hey, do you want us there? And we will be there throughout the entire process. We can also provide, those rides as well if officers aren't available or they just feel more comfortable going with someone that isn't law enforcement. When we do arrive on scene, our biggest thing is connecting them with resources. We do provide a pamphlet and a folder with all of the resources. Our biggest thing is, like he mentioned earlier, safety planning. We want to ensure that they are getting, they do have a plan in place. Sometimes they don't want to leave the residence, and that's okay. We do want to encourage them to do what is more comfortable for them and what they believe is better for their safety at that point. One of the biggest things is just ensuring if something were to happen like this in the future, what's kind of our backup plans. That is where we kind of start going over shelter information. We always want to, kind of include SVS because they do provide a lot of wraparound services. So that helps us a lot in making sure that they're kind of maintaining additional resources that are able to help. We also like to provide a lot of protective order information at that point, because we want to make sure that if they want one, they have all of the information. We're really lucky that I'm able to do them. So I do like to help a lot in those aspects, just to try and get them as soon as we can. We also provide the Utah Office for Victims of Crime. That's always something that we try to do from the beginning, just to ensure that they are able to get those claims processed. And I always let them know they stay open for a little bit of time. So if for some reason right now you're not ready to use those resources, they'll be available to you, and always encourage them to work with the rep officers and the advocates there that they're assigned. Another big one is lease termination. A lot of the time people don't want to necessarily leave because they can't break their lease. So that's kind of something that we've been working a lot on and helping explain to them how to do that entire process, and kind of guide them throughout it. We luckily do have, our grant funding that helps with a lot of that. So if it's something that we're available to do, we definitely want to be able to help with those, lease terminations and get that help. We also want to help with changing their locks, providing security system if that's something that can benefit them and they're not wanting to move, connecting them to assistance for relocation, and just general therapy and support groups. And obviously provide transportation when applicable, like you mentioned, if they need car seats, things like that. We want to make sure that we can have all of that provided to them. And we always want to do the folder, just because a lot of the time they're not going to remember that information. At that point, they're going through something super high stress, and we do go over it, but we acknowledge they're not going to remember everything. So we want to make sure that we provide them easy to read information, and just encourage them, if they have any questions, to reach out to us. And we always do a lot of follow-up on our cases as well. So that's kind of what the next slide is about, is just what our follow-up looks like, and kind of additional services that we provide after that. Perfect. So for our follow-up, again, we really just check in, see how they're doing. Sometimes that's when we start having the conversations of, oh, it wasn't a big deal, it wasn't this, and we try to just explain to them that, yeah, it didn't seem like it was a big deal, but we do want to emphasize safety overall. We do want to go over the resources again, just ask them if they had any questions about anything that we left them with. More than half of the time, they will have a lot of questions because, again, they were going through that high stress situation at that time. So we just kind of go over those. One of the biggest ones at this point when we do our follow-up is that we want to specify what their immediate needs are. A lot of the time it will be that lease termination. Maybe if they did end up staying in the home, they don't feel safe anymore. So we start going over those shelter resources again and seeing which ones would be able to provide the assistance that they need. Sometimes if the individual stays in jail, maybe they're not getting a lot of monetary assistance at that point and they need food, clothing, we connect them to those programs that are able to provide that for them. Again, protective orders. Again, West Valley, luckily I have that, so I try to provide those as much as I can, but we also try to get them connected to those outside resources like Eagle Aid Society and Utah Legal Services, so to also help, especially if it's a higher situation where we do recommend attorney assistance. And then we want to get started on relocation assistance as well. There are usually a lot of applications and things like that that they have to get started on. So we like to be able to encourage and help with that as well. A big thing, especially in West Valley, we do have a lot of individuals that could benefit from U visas. So at that point, we like to take advantage and go over that information, kind of what that process looks like. Again, we're very, very lucky that we do have a total of 4 of our 6 advocates that speak Spanish. So they are able to help in those cases and kind of help provide that information in a language that is easier to access. If it is a language that we do not speak in office, we do have like Language Line and Next Talk that we use to be able to get whatever language we need. For the most part, we have been able to get every language that we've needed as of yet, but we do reach out to, the Asian Association and other agencies to be able to assist us if there's something that comes up like that. Another thing where I don't know if it would be for every other agency, but unique to West Valley, is that we do work with our prosecutors. So we do provide a lot of court support as well. We kind of let them know if the individual was charged, what they were charged with. West Valley does handle all of their Class A cases and under. So we would be the ones that reach out and give them any updates on their court cases. We would be able to go over what the criminal protective orders look like. One of the biggest things is also restitution and cases where maybe there's property damage, criminal mischief, things like that. And we like to go over any potential plea offers or any recommendations that they have, because we want to make sure and encourage them to be part of the process, because we want their voices to be heard throughout the entire process. So we work with our prosecutors and we provide all of that information to the prosecutors as well, so they know what the victim is wanting to see happen with the case. We also help set up meetings with the prosecutors if that's something that the victims choose to do. And we always provide, those court hearing notifications. And we do go to court in those cases where victims need that additional support. And one of the last things is that we do connect them to the district attorney's office if it's a felony case. We always try to kind of have that warm handoff with the DA's office, reaching out and finding out who their advocate is there and making sure that they're getting taken care of and they know what's going on in that criminal case as well. Especially with felony cases, we want to make sure that they're getting handled, and we have great relationship with a lot of our advocates there that can help us out and give us all of the additional information if maybe the victim feels more comfortable talking to our office, but we're just making sure that they get all of the information that they need. So KJ had definitely a lot more information than I did, but if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, both Sergeant Johnston and Natalie. We really appreciate you guys' time. Is there any questions anyone had for either of them?
I've got a question. Is your brochure on your website?
I believe that it wasn't, but we're actually getting it on. And I also am providing an electric one, just a PDF form. I have provided it to some of our officers so they can send them electronically, but I think that we're working on getting it sent out to everyone so they all have access to it on those cases that they do, either over the phone or the victim just wasn't able to come in and speak with them in person. So we're working on getting those online.
Yeah, our patrol guys, we have the digital copy too, because sometimes guys will forget to restock their stash in their little forms folder in their car. So when they go out on a call and realize they don't have one, they can just print one off real quick and give it to the victims that way.
Great question. Perfect. Well, I will let Beatrice introduce our next presenter.
Thank you, you two. And our next speaker, just as we talked about law enforcement, our criminal justice advocate, and now we have someone from South Valley Services. We have Abe Rawlings with South Valley Services. He currently serves as their education director. As such, he's responsible for outreach, staff education, and training. and prevention education among the youth. And he has an undergrad in public relationship, and he's currently lives with his wife and young son in Saratoga Springs. We're so excited to hear from him today and know a little bit more about South Valley Services' role. Thank you, Abe.
Thank you, Beatrice, for the good introduction on myself. And I also wanted to thank Kevin and Natalie for their end of the presentation. We often go out and we teach about LAP presentations and how they work to our different community partners that we have. And oftentimes those community partners, it's not a police station, because I know that within police departments, there's a lot of in-house training that happens. So whenever I hear a presentation about how everything happens on that end, I find it very valuable for myself. So thank you. And then also thank you for explaining a lot of the different functions that South Valley Services has in conjunction with you guys. I know Beatrice introduced me. I also wanted to make a shout out on this call. We have Newton Borway as well as Sarah McLaren with us. That is respectively the program director and the assistant program director. And every time I give a presentation, I like to have them with me, because it's like laying bricks. I'm laying down the bricks of like what different things are, and they're like the cement that goes between. If there's any finer details that I'm missing, they're excellent at answering those types of questions. So, hopping right into it. Like I said before, oftentimes we're going out and we're teaching about the lab and its importance and how it helps many different survivors that we work with. I can't emphasize the lab enough without emphasizing the role that community advocates play when helping survivors of domestic violence. So, whenever, as you can imagine, when a survivor goes through an incident like this, they can be thrown into the middle of a very complicated situation that's hard to navigate. And for that reason, we love to have and work with our community advocates through the lab system. And there's 3 specific ways that I'd like to point out that they help our survivors that they work with. The first that I'm going to point out is empowerment and safety. So whenever someone goes through domestic violence, in most cases, and if not all cases, they're feeling a lack of empowerment in their life. Community advocates are essential with this because they provide that crucial emotional support for them where they need it. The second thing that they help with, of course, is navigation of complex systems. So when they're there, when the survivors are in that situation, suddenly they have to navigate the legal system. They have to navigate perhaps the medical care, social services, anything like that that has a lot of different steps to it and can be massively overwhelming for them. Advocates in the community are able to help them with that, and they're able to help well with it in a way that takes a lot of stress off their shoulders with it. And then the third one, of course, is healing and well-being. When someone goes through domestic violence, especially intimate partner violence, oftentimes they're going through PTSD. And because of that, clinical help, clinical care can be essential to help them heal and survive from that. And community advocates are able to link them with that. So I know we have so many different people on this call, over 90 last time I looked. If there's anyone on this call who's a community advocate, thank you so much for your help with this. South Valley Services couldn't do the work we do without that crucial aid you're able to give to survivors. But the good news is I'm not going to just be a talking face on the screen the entire time. I did prepare a presentation for you, and my goal through this presentation is I want you to understand just in a very simple way what South Valley Services does for survivors of domestic violence once they come into our care. So give me just a moment to share the screen, and I'll go over everything with you on that. Beatriz, I see your face primarily on the screen, so you're going to see your face just right back at you for just a moment while I share. So don't be startled or anything. Okay, perfect. I mentioned we have so many people on the call. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to ask for questions. Please don't be shy to ask questions. Myself and my 2 colleagues who are with me, we're happy to answer anything you need us to, and we love diving into this type of stuff. So with that, let's get started on this. Okay. We all have a good idea of what domestic violence is, so I'm not trying to sound like a broken wheel with it, but something I like to point out about domestic violence to anyone who I'm teaching in the community is that it's a pattern of behavior that a perpetrator uses to gain power and control over another person. I want to emphasize power and control. Another way of saying this is that domestic violence is a way for a person to have unnecessary control over the actions of another person. And this or rather, this is the reason why it becomes a pattern of behavior that they have, as opposed to just a one-time instance. Kevin was explaining that those who commit domestic violence, it's not usually just a one-time thing. It's usually something that has been happening in a pattern over time. And I just want to emphasize how true that is. And much of it comes from that power and control that they're trying to gain over that other person. And then also just some Utah statistics on this. 40 to 50% of Utah homicides are due to intimate partner violence. And then, of course, in Utah, 1 in 2 trans and non-binary people experience intimate partner violence sometime during their lifetime. 1 in 2 Indigenous women, 1 in 3 women, and 1 in 4 men. This one always surprises people because it's so close to the stat on women. But the truth is that men also go through these types of experiences during their lifetime. So the next question that I often get during a presentation like this is, well, what's the difference between intimate partner violence and domestic violence? Aren't they the same thing? And what I would say to that is that intimate partner violence is a more specific category of domestic violence. So like was explained, intimate partner violence, it could be a spouse, fiance, boyfriend, girlfriend, or dating partner, romantic partner, and then consensual sexual partners. It's independent of gender identity, and it does not matter if the couple is currently or has ever cohabitated. Something that always pops up with this that I don't think was mentioned before was one person can believe that they're in a relationship with another person, whereas the other person doesn't really, maybe they don't agree with that person. But for the purposes of the LAP, if we're taking people into our shelter because they're in a dangerous situation, that would also fall under that category. So if one person believes they're in a relationship, but the other doesn't really believe they're in that relationship, but they're being abused by the other person. And then, of course, domestic violence, it often acts as an umbrella term that can include child abuse, elder abuse, and abuse between siblings. Okay, so that brings us to South Valley Services and what we do for the different clients that we serve. I want to note that we're not just bringing people into shelter to keep them away from the perpetrator. We do several different things in order to help us empower the individual. I stated before that when someone goes through domestic violence, they're often feeling unempowered. And what one of our main goals is during this process of helping them is to help them gain back that feeling of being empowered. We do this through 4 main ways. And the main ways are those that you see on the screen. We, of course, have the shelter. And we don't only have one shelter, we have 2 that we operate right now. One operates primarily in Salt Lake County, and the other operates in Tooele County. That one is about as of a year ago. It's called our Pathways Shelter. So we're able to serve clients in both counties and get them many of these services that you see on screen. We have the case management team. These are the individuals who I was stating before are crucial to have in the community as community advocates. So if we have someone who comes to us who needs help navigating the minefields that could be, help them navigate the minefields that they're going through because of the situation they're in, these individuals can help them. So it could be linking them with supportive services from community-based locations. It could be helping them with housing. It could be helping them with financial empowerment, which is something that I help with and I'll get more into here in a couple of slides. So they're just kind of the jack of all trades with the different survivors that we work with. We have clinical services as well. They offer therapy to survivors of sexual and domestic violence. And we work with both adults and children. And also, we're not only working with those in shelter, we're working with those in the community. That's same for the case management team that we have. We're not limited to just those in shelter who have gone through a high danger situation. We're also working with those who come to us from the community. And then where I come in is with prevention and education. The way I like to introduce this is that we found when it comes to abusive relationships that someone who goes through an abusive relationship when they're young, perhaps a teenager, they're more likely to go through it when they're more into their adult years as well. What does this have to do with prevention and education? Well, we don't only teach adults about domestic violence, we also go to youth in many different settings to teach them about it. Because what we want to do is we want to make sure that youth have that knowledge and know-how so that they know beforehand what an unhealthy relationship looks like. If they know that, they're less likely to be in one, and then therefore, when they're in their adult years, they're less likely to have perpetual abusive relationships as their life goes on. That's why my team is important. We're going to different youth and we're also teaching DV related things to different organizations. Perhaps it could be a church, perhaps it could be at a school or a business. Anything that falls into that category, we can go and educate on this. Okay, so let me break down the 4 different pillars that we have right here. We have one shelter in Salt Lake County, and we also have one in Tooele. The one that's in Salt Lake County is what we call the sanctuary. It was built back in 1998, just to start. Just to give perspective on this, the movement for DV shelters, it began way back in the 1970s, and then as time went on, it came more into Utah, and many caring community members in Salt Lake County, they saw the need in the community to have services for those going through domestic violence. So they came together back in this year and they formed South Valley Services. Currently at the sanctuary, we have 13 rooms and 57 beds. There's a community kitchen, computer room. There's a children's learning center. It's surprising how many people don't know about this particular one, but oftentimes when I'm visiting shelter, it's not only the survivor in the intimate partner relationship that is at the shelter. Oftentimes this happens in a family, so we're taking both the victim and their children into shelter. And because of that, we have need of the Children's Learning Center to help provide resources to the children who are there as well. So there's an outdoor playground, there's counseling services, clothing boutique, and then I want to mention, for obvious reasons, our shelter location is confidential. Shelter staff, we have a director on site, an associate advocate, resident advocates. We have the Children's Learning Center advocates, of course, and then there's also volunteers that work with us very often through this. Case management, what does this look like? If someone goes to case management to get help from one of our case managers, they must be a primary victim of domestic and/or sexual violence. They need to be 18 years or older, and they do not need to be in the shelter in order to access these services. Anyone in the community who's going through, be it domestic violence or IPV, they can go and access this at any time. Gender identity, it's independent of that. Anyone of any gender identity can access our case management, and there is no time frame of when you need to or restriction of the time you may use case management services. So often with this, we're asked, well, what do case managers even help with? Like, what types of services are you talking about? Well, there's housing resources, and then the different breakdown of that is below. There's food, clothing, safety planning, which is so important. And the reason I say that is because if someone's in an abusive relationship, there's a lot of time where it's heat of the moment and they don't know what to do. And perhaps a decision is made that isn't in the best interest of their safety going forward. And case managers, they can help safety plan with our clients, so they're making the best decisions possible in order to help them get out of that relationship. There's also employment resources, child welfare, immigration services referrals, financial empowerment services. I'll go more into that in a moment, and then physical and mental health screening with it. Clinical department. We also offer support and resources for individuals in the community through our clinical department that are affected by domestic violence. Clients do not have to stay in shelter to receive these services. The wait list is generally about 2 to 3 weeks on this. And for those in the community, we're able to provide 10 sessions for them. And I believe this is different for those within shelter, but for any questions on that, I could have help from our programs director or assistant programs director on this. And then child therapy services are available with parental and guardian consent as well. Okay, and then prevention and education, my team. I have a lot of pride in this. We go through all of these different courses with them, and it's not just limited to these. As a part of my job, I'm also over making different curriculum for different situations, and it's happening all the time. I want to point out that the educational seminars and presentations that we do, they're free. It's actually a funny situation. I was at an organization maybe a month ago, and I was giving a presentation on what we do as an education team. And at the end, there was just an awkward silence. And the person who I was presenting to was like, so how much? How much is it going to be? And I was so taken aback by that question. And I was like, well, it's a nonprofit. So everything that we teach on my team, it's free. We just want to be able to get into the door and teach at your organization so we can get the knowledge out about this type of thing to help prevention. So what do our classes look like that we run? We have domestic violence 101, which just goes into the basics of domestic violence. As I said before, we teach young people often, and often that falls under teen dating violence prevention. And as kind of a sub bullet point right here, we have Teen Violence 101 for organizations. And what I mean by this is that we teach to both students, and for those who often work with youth, we also go into their organizations and teach them about teen violence. For example, we just recently taught at a church over here in it was what city was it? I believe it was Sandy, actually. We just recently taught there because the elders of that church they work often with youth, and they also need the know-how on how to work and safety plan with youth. I mentioned before that I'll go over financial empowerment classes. So I do this course in conjunction with the case managers. So if someone is going through domestic violence, often a category of that comes up is financial abuse. If someone's being financially abused, what that means is perhaps they're cut off from money and they're no longer to pay bills anymore. They're no longer able to buy certain things or have certain necessities met. And oftentimes that affects their credit. So we do the financial empowerment classes for our clients in order to help them, first of all, learn about different aspects of finances. And then also we help pay off the different things that are negatively affecting their credit so that their credit scores aren't absolutely destroyed by the situation they're in. We do Healthy Relationships program, which it's an 8-week course that we have it now, but we're also updating it at the moment. And as was mentioned, we do the LAP assessment. We have different community partners, both police stations and community-based organizations that we work with who do the LAP assessment. We go out and teach them about it, and we help strengthen our relationship with them that way. And then, of course, we have Healthy Friendships and bystander prevention. That's coming up this coming year with it. Anyway, I can go on and on about prevention and education, but I'll spare you from that. So no worries on it. We also have a shelter that is over in Tooele County that serves our clientele over there. And what you see on screen right now is similar to the other slide I showed you. It just shows the services that we have at that shelter for those in Tooele County. So it's been in operation for 20 years, 4 bedrooms, 12 beds. There's community kitchen, computer lab, much of the same things that are in our Salt Lake location. But I wanted to give a shout out that we also have case management, legal advocacy, hospital response over there, remote counseling services, life skill and education groups, as well as support groups and the clothing boutique. And then the shelter staff that we have on site over there, exactly the same as we have in our Salt Lake County location. Anyway, I understand that when someone's going over their services, it could start sounding a little bit redundant. I hope that I explained it in a way that was easy to understand though. So I'm gonna make a call back to what I said before. If we have any questions from this giant phone call we're on right now, please ask them right now, because you have 3 good individuals from South Valley Services on here right now. And I'm pretty confident we can answer your questions integrally at the moment. So what questions do all of you have about our services?
So just a question in the chat, Abe. Do you have education dates or times on your website, and can general public attend virtually?
So we have on our website ways in which you can sign up for a presentation for us to come out. So our presentations, they're dependent on, like, we don't have set days in which we do certain things. What we do is we schedule different presentations throughout the community. So those aren't on our website. However, there is a way to sign up for a presentation on our website. And once that happens, you're connected with me, and then I connect with whoever wrote in, and we set it up that way. Also, for right now, we do have some recording of our education resources on the website. That's being updated within the next few months, though, with more updated information, as well as the form to have us come out and teach at your organization. Thank you for the question, whoever asked that.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen, for the question, and thank you, Abe, for that response. Is there any other questions for Abe, as well as our West Valley folks?
I'm just also wondering what kind of organizations are reaching out to you for presentations. I'm just trying to pick your brain about community awareness engagement over in your area.
So it depends on the presentation. When it's our lab presentation, of course, it's our partners. I've had several reach outs on that recently. We've had a reach out from the Wise Woman Conference that we're doing in July. We've had several different reach outs from several different schools. We operate and teach in all school districts in Salt Lake County, and we don't only teach students, we also teach teachers about this. For example, in August, I'll be going to Canyons District to help teach health teachers about our curriculum. We have different organizations that request presentations from us as well. So for example, we'll be doing in the next, maybe at the end of summer, we'll be doing something with BACA. We also do tabling events at different organizations. And like everyone on here, I'm sure you know how tabling events are. They just occur all the time, and we're at many of those. We also have more of a mainstay in other places. So for example, we teach twice a month over at Youth Services, and we're going to start teaching different courses at the Columbus Education Center. That'll be both in Harriman as well as over in Salt Lake. And it's not just these that I'm speaking about. There's others that aren't coming to me off the top of my head. The point I'm trying to make is there's all sorts of different types of settings that we can present in, and we're happy to do so.
So thank you
Does
so
that
much.
answer your question, or help to at least?
It did, thank you.
You bet. Other questions for me?
Thank you so much. I've been a lot of the domestic violence shelters, rape crisis centers do have prevention education. So in your local area, I would encourage you to reach out to your community-based program and ask them kind of some presentations. Cassie put in the chat that Friends Against Family Violence present in their addiction recovery programs with about healthy relationships, healthy relationship class. And then someone's just asking if you'll put your contact information in the chat, Abe. Or,
Oh, 100%. I'll do that. Give me just a moment.
Yeah, you're good. No worries.
Usually I work with Microsoft Teams, so I'm like looking for the chat button right here.
No,
Oh,
you're good.
there
I
it
know
is. Perfect.
we're on different platforms, so I know it's always throws me off. And Microsoft Teams for me, I'm like, it's so foreign. So that's so I'm used to different ones.
So for everyone on right now, there's my information. I just barely hit enter. arawlings@svsutah.org. Please reach out to me if you need any, if you need us to come out, or if you have any questions about the organization in general. I'm happy to answer those.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Abe. We really appreciate the coverage of talking about kind of that beginning initial interactions and a stage of working with domestic violence survivors and victims in general, and just how important that really the beginning of those contacts, that first interactions can really kind of change the trajectory of the case. That having really that positive, doing the lap, having them understand that maybe the level of risk, helping them recognize their safety concerns and things like that, I think is so crucial. So I'm so glad that we were able to have Abe here today, as well as Natalie and KJ with, or Kevin, sorry, I know that I'm used to Beatrice calling him KJ. So, but just to really go over kind of that beginning stage as you guys look at the scenario, looking at how important that kind of beginning of those first interactions when the victims are reaching out and asking for help, either through the community-based programs first or after, or through law enforcement, that that first communication, that first piece can be so crucial for our victims. So thank you so much again, Abe and our partners from West Valley. We appreciate you. And then we'll stop.
You bet. Thank you.